Tank is by far the least played role in Overwatch, and I don't think balance changes will fix it. I think the issue goes far deeper than just the balance state. I believe the role of tank itself is fundamentally flawed. Let's dive into why. Alright, firstly, we need to tackle why the tank fantasy, as it's called, doesn't feel good. So I think this is one of the main core problems here of why tank is so underplayed. Tanking sucks in all games. Tank is typically the least played role in games that have a tank. Most players don't want to be bullet sponges. They don't want to take all the damage. Being shot at feels really bad. It's unfun. Why would you want to be shot? Now again, I'm talking about most players. There are some people that enjoy that, right? Even in MMO RPGs, tank is often the least played or least appealing fun role for a lot of people. Obviously, I think MMOs have a slight edge, and some people really do enjoy tank characters, like Warrior in World of Warcraft, I think is very, very popular. The thing is, the idea of tank is that you are the thing that is going to get shot. You are the thing that is going to get hit. You are the sort of playmaker, damage taker role. Right now in MMOs, this actually works because tanks rely on something called a taunt, where they're able to click a ability on a target, causing that target to only prioritize attacking them and not their teammates. You can't do this in Overwatch or any PvP hero shooter. You can't do it in PvP games, because how would you force someone to look at you? Now, you could try to say, hey, League of Legends has taunt in them, but that game is very different. MOBAs are very different. You can have brief moments of taunting, but it would feel awful in a first-person shooter game. At the core of tanking, it has always been a struggle as a fantasy, as an idea in lots of games. Most players don't want to be the one being shot at constantly, because it just never feels good. Well, how does this relate into Overwatch, right? Overwatch tanking feels as if you have to be the big target that goes in front of everyone and takes all the damage. And you're playing a hero shooter here, where loads of people have, high mobility, fun weapons and abilities that will do damage to you, and you're deciding to pick the role where you have to, be the one that gets hit by all that. That doesn't appeal to many people. Now, there is a design mismatch in hero shooters. Overwatch borrows a lot from MMO design. Initially, we all know this because Overwatch was meant to be an MMO RPG when it was like Project Titan or something, and then it got changed into this. That's why there was going to be a PvE and stuff, and that was all the idea, right? None of that matters. But the idea was we borrowed from it, and that's why we have tank support and DPS. For a tank to work in Overwatch and, people to shoot at them, they need to be threatening. You don't need to be threatening in MMO because you have a taunt. But here, you need to pose a threat. You have to be something that you have to care for. If a jungle queen runs at you, you should need to shoot her, not just go past her. Because the thing is, if tanks were only tanky and didn't do damage, what would happen is no one would ever attack them, and they just ignore and kill everyone else, and tank would feel even worse. They also need mitigation, because obviously if they're going to get shot a lot, they need some way to survive and stay up. So now they have mitigation and damage tools with high health. Right, you see how, again, quite an overloaded character here. This is just because you cannot force targeting. You cannot force people to shoot you. What this ends up making is tank ends up becoming an awkward hybrid of a role. They end up kind of feeling like these big DPS. People have said this a lot. They end up feeling like this big DPS. Right now, if you were to play, say for instance my Jungle Queen example, it would feel like playing a damage character, but you are just buffed to the absolute bazillions, right? You are just so buffed. Because tanks need to have high damage or strong mitigation or both, which is insane. But even then, people still don't want to play them. You can give them everything and no one plays them. So there is a problem. There is a problem here because you can't even giga buff people into playing the role. So this is where responsibility and the psychological pressure of tank comes into play. Tank as a role is a lot of responsibility. Even in MMORPGs and other games, tank is a highly responsible role, especially in 5v5. Solo tanking is terrifying. You are the only tank on your team. You end up being the responsibility, which ends up being the blame. But people love to blame tanks. It's very easy to blame a tank because, well, there's one of you and you look like you need to be doing the most, right? That's how it feels. A lot of players think the tank needs to be doing everything, even though that's obviously not the case. You all need to be doing something. And players don't want to be blamed, so they're not going to play tank. Every time they play a game, they see people blame tank. So why would someone play that? Because then I'm just going to get blamed for everything, even if it's not your fault. Tank, so, like, by design feels like a leader role. I mean, it's literally, the name is tank. It feels like you have to be the leader, you have to be the reason to go in, you have to be the focus every time you're charge of your team, right? And some people like that. Some people like taking that leadership. Some people like being the big four guy. But most people kind of want to do their own thing. They want to have a couple people to fall back on. They want to be able to chill, you know, things like that. That's why support becomes so popular, right? Being focused and being responsible for all of it is stressful. Just is. So people are going to get blamed a lot. And this is a psychological issue with the role, the name of tank, and the whole idea of a tank. That's why I think kind of the role will never fully work in this way. And I think this has even been noted before by some devs, that I think because it's called tank, that puts off a lot of new players when they try the role. They're like, well, that's the tanking role. Because it also, what it does is it makes people play incorrectly because the name is tank. The name is tank, so you go out of your way to try and take as much damage as possible. You try to get hit by everything. You try to, you know, use your Rhine shield to protect your team and stuff. But this is not how the role plays. Role is just a big DPS, but everyone tries to play it like a tank because that's the name of the role. There also is a little bit of a, you know, player identity mismatch within the fact that this is a hero shooter. Hero shooter. It attracts gun people. I've mentioned this a lot when I talk about niche characters like Venture and May and Farah and stuff, but a hero shooter generally attracts people that like to shoot things. Even one of the most popular supports in the game, Ana, right? Ana and Juno and stuff have guns. They shoot people. Right, people want to play DPS style heroes, and yes, of course, support is really popular and Mercy is really popular, but those are far more of, it's a big outlier of a thing. But when you look at the average, a lot of the characters are these gun focused characters, and people like to shoot at things. That's just how it works. So you have a bit of an identity mismatch where you're already kind of in a bit of a niche by being a character that doesn't, you know, have a lot of these gun focused characters. You're more melee, more close range focused, you know, or, you know, you've got a beam like Zarya or these projectile weapons. So, and you've already got a fairly niche role. So if those characters were in like the DPS role or something, they would be pretty niche. And so then you also then put that on top of the fact that tank itself is going to be just less popular. You're going to end up having a role that doesn't appeal to most hero shooter players. When I went to go play Deadlock is a hero shooter where the roles are far more, you know, merged and overlapped. Kind of everyone does a bit of everything, right? And any character that looked like they were going to be tanky, I just stayed away from because it's just not something I want to do. I want to, you know, player, shooter, MOBA. I don't want to tank things. And that is probably how most people are approaching Overwatch. And I realized that. I was like, I saw like Abram just and I was like, this guy, you know, he's an engaged like tank guy. I'm not going to play that. And so then I lean towards the person that might have a gun or some cool abilities that does something that isn't tanky. And I'm someone who's, you know, I'm discussing this issue. I'm aware of these issues. It's just how this type of game works. League doesn't have, like, tanks aren't the most popular thing in League of Legends, but it's better, I think, than shooters because people are playing a MOBA that is like top down a MOBA, and tanks make more sense in this, right? Whereas they just don't appeal nearly as much to shooter players. They feel far less direct, less expressive, which also then just means tanks are less fun for most players. Objectively, tanking is less fun for most players. And that is not going to be a, oh, people need to try it more, we need to do something. Just objectively, the role of tank is going to be unfun for most players. The only thing we could try to do is try bring up the tank numbers just a little bit, right? And now let's get into the big system thing, right? 5v5 versus 66, because people have mentioned this a lot, and I will give this a little bit of time because I don't care. But 5v5, 66 doesn't fix it. Doesn't matter which one it is, it's never going to fix the problem, right? Let's just go through this. 6v6 Q times, role Q, 66 Q times are longer than current Q times. I know Q times, at least for me, are quite long. But 66 would be even longer. I'd be getting another like 10 minutes, 5 minutes on my queues, right? But the role of tank becomes more fun, okay? So the people that do like playing tank get to have a bit better of a time. But the queues still stay long because the role's not good enough to outweigh the fact that it's still less popular because of all the other reasons I mentioned. 5v5, the queue times are better, but tank is less fun. So I get into a game a little quicker, but now the tank players that exist are having less fun. And then what even happens even more is that the tank players that were 66 guys now hate tanking 5v5, and so now they don't play, and now you have an even smaller size of people. Right now you have an even smaller size of people, and the queue times just go back up anyway. Tanks aren't popular in 66, still. I do not believe that anyone can give me the argument that the new tanks have made a difference. I think there is so much psychological damage with the role name of tank and what tank is and what it's associated with that it would take far too long to even override people's opinions on that. Even if tank was made perfect tomorrow, it would take too long. And again, those fundamental flaws of the role of tank are still always going to be there because of the type of role it is. So regardless of format, it's going to be unpopular. Both formats have major negatives, so I don't want to hear any of this just, well, we're into 66 now, this would even happen. Because 66 was not perfect either, right? There's a reason things change and things swap. It's not perfect either, right? You're never going to find a perfect tank system. You're never going to perfect it. It just doesn't work because the role is so fundamentally flawed with the way that it works in a hero shooter. It will always struggle. Okay, in conclusion, because it sounds really, really negative, I think the tank role is cool, and I wish there was a way to fix it, and I wish we could do something without doing anything drastic, you know, anything massive, right? But no perfect solution exists, and if it was so easy, it would be solved, right? But overall, tank is really scary to play because the role holds the most responsibility, the most blame, has a mismatch of the fact that people think you need to be tanking and need to be in the face of everyone. So people play it incorrectly, which means they find it unfun, which means no one ends up playing it. And then you kind of live in this chamber where everyone hates tank. Even when they are giga buffed and made super strong, people still don't want to play it. So the format thing doesn't even matter because I'm telling you, people don't care about the format. Tank is unfun for most players, and that is a fact. And people don't like playing tank. I hope all these reasons made sense, but it's flawed. People don't like tanking. That's it. I just don't think there's a simple solution here. So, result, tank remains the least played role. No matter how the system changes, no matter what happens, tank will always be unpopular. Thank you very much. Let me know why. Maybe you play tank. If you're a tank player, let me know your thoughts. Maybe you have massive disagreements. I'd like to know why. But just know, if you are a tank guy and you have massive disagreements, you are really in a minority here with that role. And I'm glad you found, you know, you found some fun through the role of tank. I personally don't find it too fun, but that's what it is. I'd like to know why people find tanking fun. And any, you know, if you have some wild solution, cool as well. Peace out.